10. Mother's murder. Ashley Pegram of South Carolina had 3 children and lived in the small town of Somerville. She was a kind person, and she was hoping to find a partner to share her life with. On April 3, 2015, Ashley went out on her first date with a young man named Edward Bonilla. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. Ashley was missing for days, and those days dragged into weeks. Nobody knew where she was. Her family couldn't get a hold of her, and the police had to get involved. They ended up finding her body in a shallow grave in the middle of the woods over a month later. The obvious suspect from the beginning was Edward. He was the last person to see her alive, and he didn't strike the authorities as the most stable individual. Plus, there was a mountain of evidence stacked up against him. First of all, his phone pinged at various cell phone towers leading from the place of the date all the way out to Harleyville, where the body was discovered. After the police applied pressure, Edward admitted to murdering Ashley. Edward said he and Ashley had been drinking, and that he accidentally hit her with his mom's car. Apparently, she had gotten out of the vehicle to use the toilet, and he accidentally ran her over a little bit. After that, she became wild and erratic. She grew violent and upset with Edward, and so he restrained her to keep himself safe, and in the process, strangled her to death. It was all a really weird excuse. And in the end, Edward was given life in prison for his first date murder. 9. First date with a maniac. In February of 2019, Elaine Campos, a 57-year-old single mom, was beaten viciously in her own apartment in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It happened while on her first date with a savage maniac. This maniac is named Vinicius Serra, 30 years younger than his victim. According to the attacker, he woke up in the night, had a psychotic outbreak, and was compelled to hit the woman. He viciously attacked her for 4 hours until help arrived. She was left with a broken nose, the orbital bones around her eyes nearly shattered, her face fractured, her teeth gone, and in need of over 40 stitches. It all started 8 months earlier when they began talking on social media. They chatted for a very long time, developed a friendship, and really thought things were going well. Then Elaine invited Vinicius to her apartment. The pair went to bed together, and then she was awoken in the middle of the night by a fist to her face. She screamed, tried to defend herself, and then passed out from being beaten so mercilessly. She was only rescued when she woke up hours later and started screaming because the man was still beating her. Her neighbors broke down the door, apprehended the maniac, and handed him over to the police. So far, the only motive he's given is that he's completely insane. And yeah, it definitely looks that way. 8. The speedboat date. In December of 2015, Jack Shepard and Charlotte Brown were thrown off a boat. Charlotte died, and Jack was totally unhurt. The pair had been on their first date when it happened, when Jack suggested they go speedboating on the River Thames in England. Backing it up to the beginning, Jack Shepard was the kind of guy who liked to date a lot of girls. He had purchased the speedboat specifically to try and seduce women on it, and it was working up until he and Charlotte got a little too deep into the champagne. He got drunk, he was trying to impress her by driving erratically, and he lost control of the motorized vehicle. The boat flipped, Charlotte was flung into the river, and it was the last date she would ever go on. In the court proceedings that followed, we learned that Jack had used his boat to seduce at least 10 women, then bring them back to his houseboat in Hammersmith. Maybe it was his bachelor lifestyle that really rubbed the jury the wrong way, but they convicted him of manslaughter by gross negligence and gave him 10 years in prison. 7. The getaway driver. A 40-year-old woman in Massachusetts went on a date with a man named Christopher Castillo. They met for the very first time that very day, December 5th, 2016. The woman agreed to pick Christopher up at his parents' house in Rhode Island. Then they drove about 30 minutes north into Attleboro, where she was living. And to make things really bizarre, the woman said Christopher was slouched in the passenger seat and drinking wine the whole time she was driving. It was a really weird start to a date. And to be totally honest, the woman probably should have put an end to it before it got so out of hand. But alas, human politeness gets us into all kinds of bizarre situations. Christopher asked his date if she could stop at the Bristol County Savings Bank. She should have taken the opportunity to drive away and leave the man there. But she didn't. Instead, she sat and waited. Little did she know Christopher was inside the bank pulling off a robbery. He sprinted back to her car with a gun, a hat and glasses he'd used as a disguise, and $1,000 in cash. It didn't take long for the cops to catch up to them. After all, it wasn't even 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A police officer saw the car drive by, pulled up behind it and flashed his lights, and the woman pulled into the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts. She immediately stepped out of the car and flung her hands up, and the police had to struggle to pull her date out of the passenger seat. The woman was arrested as an accessory after the fact and held on a bail of $250,000. However, the prosecutors did eventually drop the charges and released her when it became clear she had been used. As for the date, he was given 3 years for robbery and 2 years for assaulting the police officers in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. 6. The Handsome Bachelor. The dating game was a wildly popular TV show back in the 1970s. On September 13, 1978, the Bachelorette on the show, Cheryl Bradshaw, chose Bachelor number 1 from the lineup of eligible men. His name was Rodney Alcala, and unbeknownst to her, he was a brutal murderer. More than that, he was an active serial killer. After the show was over, it would have been typical for the two to go on a date. This was, after all, the dating game. But when they went backstage and Bradshaw met the man she had chosen on the show, something didn't feel right. He offered her a first date that she would never forget, and Bradshaw felt something in her gut that wasn't right. She turned him down and said she never wanted to see him again. Her intuition likely saved her life. That first date probably would have been the death of her. But thanks to that gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach, she never found out. But if the show had done a background check on Rodney, she never would have been put in that position in the first place. They would have seen that Rodney had spent 5 years in prison for abusing children and had been on the top 10 most wanted fugitives list of the FBI. Plus, he had already killed 4 women. He was caught the next year after abducting a 12-year-old girl from the beach. The girl's friends were able to help a sketch artist create a picture of the abductor's face, and the police immediately recognized Rodney as the killer. He spent the rest of his life in prison before dying of natural causes. 5. Catfished and robbed. In 2016, Plenty of Fish was the dating app of choice. Tinder was only just getting started, and a lot of people in America were still using the classic POF. One of these people was a man named Adam Hillary, hoping to meet a nice girl. Instead, he met Haley Rose Bustos. She was definitely a girl, but she was not very nice. He picked her up, and they went bowling in the small town of Winter Haven, Florida. After that, they went back to his place, hung out for a bit, met his roommate, and then Haley went home. After the date, Haley sent Adam a text saying she had had a good time. She wanted to meet up the night after at his place. So the next night rolled around, Adam thought something exciting was going to be happening, and then everything went real dark, real quick. Haley brought 3 strange men to Adam's house, including 2 men with a sordid history of crime and violent felonies. All 3 overpowered Adam and entered his house, and that was the end. They dragged Adam into the kitchen, he cried and begged for his life, and he was executed right there on his kitchen floor. According to Auburndale's Deputy Police Chief Andy Ray, the suspects then went downstairs, pulled their car up to the front of the apartment, and loaded up Adam's Xbox, his TV, and iPhone, all the valuables that Haley had spotted the night before. For her role in the robbery, she was given $50 by the other guys. The man who actually pulled the trigger, identified as Andre Warner, was convicted of the crime, and the jury recommended that he get the death penalty. However, the case is still ongoing. 4. The first date stabber. A 19-year-old, perfectly ordinary-seeming young woman with her whole life ahead of her used an online dating app to lure a man to his death. We don't know this girl's name because she's German and the country has very strict privacy laws. We only know her as Sarah M, but we at least know a few things about the case. She idolized American serial killers with posters of Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez on her wall. She was disturbed, or at least dangerously obsessed. Prior to the attack in May of 2021, Sarah purchased a camping knife. Then she set up a fake dating profile under the name Domina Cherry. That same day, she started talking to a man named Zayed E, nearly 20 years older than her. This man picked Sarah up from her apartment in Bavaria, and as they drove down the street, she plunged the camping knife into his neck. We don't know how exactly she thought this would end, but whatever she had thought in her brain, that's not how it went down. She had nowhere to go, the man was bleeding to death in his car, and she fled the scene covered in his blood. The police tracked her down within the hour while her date was taken to the hospital. He died 3 weeks after the incident, and Sarah was given a sentence of 12 years at a therapeutic facility. 3. The Tinder Killer. And yet another twisted case of online dating gone wrong. A New York nurse was killed. The killer is Danielle Drayton from Connecticut, who strangled Samantha Stewart after a first date in 2019. The pair met on Tinder. They went on their first date, and then Samantha invited the strange man back to her apartment. Once inside, Drayton did away with the poor woman, then performed lewd acts on her cold corpse. It really doesn't get much sicker than this. The maniac who committed this awful crime, as if desecrating a body wasn't enough, then stole Samantha's credit cards and used one of them to pay for a flight to California. He thought he could get away, but was captured there within the week and extradited back to New York. And if you'd like to feel a little bit sick about the justice system, just listen to this. At the time of Samantha's death, her killer had just been freed on a bail of $2,000. He was waiting to stand trial in Nassau County for strangling a different woman. Basically, he should have been in jail already. And because he wasn't, Samantha became his next victim. 2. Ran over. In late 2014, a first date ended with one man dead, killed by the woman he had gone on a date with. She ran him over with his own truck. According to the police, the incident happened about 45 minutes from Seattle. The man and woman had known each other for only a handful of hours. They were drinking a lot, and they went to visit one of the man's friends to keep the party going. The friend happened to be a tattoo artist. She asked if he could give her a small tattoo on her chest, and as he was tattooing her, they began to get intimate. This angered the first man, who had brought the woman there in the first place. The two men got into a disagreement. The woman punched her original date in the face, and then he slapped her back. It was chaos. It was around this time that she fled. She ran outside wearing nothing but a t-shirt, jumped into her date's truck, and then ran him over with it. Leon Shaw, 53 years old, was discovered dead in his friend's driveway. The woman crashed the truck a quarter-mile down the road and had to be rescued by paramedics and taken to the hospital. 1. The unwelcome guest. A man was forced to call the police back in 2017 after his summer date with a tender stranger went horribly wrong. Everything started out all right, and then the man invited his date back to his home. Once there, she refused to leave. She literally would not get out of this guy's house and simply stayed in his bed all day, even after he asked her to scram. It was one of those slow creeping things that just kind of snuck up on him. He first told her that she had to leave before bedtime because he had to go to work in the morning. She asked if she could stay for a quick dinner, and he said okay. Then after dinner, she purposely passed out before he could say anything. He had to shake her out of her fake sleep, but she said she wouldn't leave because she was too tired. After 2 days of this, the man finally called the cops and had the woman forcefully removed from his bed. It was a really weird experience, one that left him wondering if dating is even worth it anymore.
9. Skyla niece, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shoaf. One night in July 2012, 16-year-old Skyla niece slipped quietly out of her Morgantown, West Virginia home through her bedroom window. She was never seen alive again after surveillance footage captured her getting into a car with her best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shoaf. Sheila allegedly claimed that the trio drove around and got high before dropping Skyla off about a block away from her home so that she could sneak back inside. The seemingly concerned pal even helped the niece family in their desperate search for the missing teen, but it was all a huge lie. As it turned out, Sheila and Rachel had decided after years of bonding like sisters that they no longer liked Skyla. In fact, they hated her so much that ending the friendship wouldn't be enough to satisfy them. They wanted Skyla permanently out of the picture so that they never had to see or speak to her again. Months later, Rachel confessed under pressure from interrogators to being involved in Skyla's disappearance. She led detectives to her former best friend's body in the Pennsylvania woods, where she and Sheila had lured Skyla under the promise of a harmless fun time. Instead, they'd stabbed her to death and left her remains at the mercy of nature. Sheila Eddy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a life sentence with mercy, meaning she'll be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Rachel Shoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years. She'll be eligible for parole after serving 10. Meanwhile, Skyla's devastated parents are left to carry on without their beloved only child. 8. Anna Viani Martinez Lugo. A TikToker named Anna Viani Martinez Lugo recently made headlines for her claims that her best friend nearly sold her into sex slavery. The 21-year-old, who lives in Mexico, went viral after she posted a video explaining how the series of terrifying events unfolded back in 2013. Lugo's bestie said that she'd been chosen for an exchange student program to Spain and invited Anna, who was just 12 years old at the time, to go with her as a guest. Of course, Lugo jumped at the offer and got right to filling out the necessary paperwork. But she was slightly taken aback to see that the documents asked her to specify if she was a virgin. Something didn't feel right, so Anna showed the papers to her mother, who contacted the teen's school. Administrators soon broke the disturbing news that the alleged exchange program that Anna had been invited to participate in didn't exist. Anna's mother visited the best friend's home and cleverly gained access to the family computer, where she found shocking evidence of the human trafficking plot. The friend had been dating an older boy who threatened to hurt her family if she refused to find candidates for the sex slavery operation. Speaking with Jam Press, Anna said that while she tries to see the situation from her former bestie's perspective, she still hasn't forgiven her. Anna described her ex-friend's actions as wrong and a crime, despite any perceived force that may have been involved. She took the ordeal as a lesson learned and uses it as a platform to warn other young and vulnerable people to follow their instinct. Anna also expressed her gratitude toward her mother for being vigilant and uncovering the truth before it was too late. 7. Brook Preston and Randy Herman. Randy Herman became close friends with Brook Preston and her sister Jordan in their hometown of Wyalusing, Pennsylvania. But the trio became separated when Brook and Jordan moved to West Palm Beach, Florida. Randy stayed in Wyalusing, where his life began to spiral out of control. He drank heavily to cope with his issues and including his depression over his dead-end job at a meat factory. In 2016, he inherited several $1,000s from his father's estate and decided to join Brook and Jordan in West Palm Beach. They rented a house together and Randy got a job, but he quit just a few months later. His drinking worsened as he squandered his inheritance on his vices. Eventually, Brook decided to move to Buffalo with her boyfriend. She and Randy spent the day drinking before she was scheduled to leave with the last of her belongings. That's when Randy allegedly started acting weird. Brook told another friend via text message that Randy was naked in her bedroom closet, stumbling and acting belligerent. The next morning, he stabbed her to death. Randy dialed 911 and immediately confessed to the crime. But he said that he couldn't remember killing his best friend, and he seemed genuinely remorseful and distraught. His lawyer argued in court that Randy was sleepwalking when he committed the horrifying act. It sounds hard to believe, but has been known to happen from time to time. In fact, some defendants have even been found not guilty of committing brutally violent murders based on sleepwalking claims. Prosecutors claimed that Brook had rejected Randy's physical advances, sending him into a murderous rage despite there being no evidence of the two ever being more than friends, or of Randy having romantic feelings for Brook. A jury nevertheless convicted him of first-degree murder in 2019, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Randy continues to maintain his innocence. 6. Mod Abdullah and Rogelio Butch Bagaboyo. Earlier this year, a 60-year-old college professor from Kamloops, British Columbia, named Mod Abdullah was reported missing after he failed to show up for work at Thompson Rivers University. His body was found weeks later inside a plastic bin in an abandoned rental van. Police ruled Abdullah's death a homicide and arrested his good friend, 54-year-old lawyer Rogelio Butch Bagaboyo, in connection with the horrific incident. Bagaboyo faces one count of interfering with a dead body for allegedly stuffing Abdullah's remains in the plastic bin they were found in. But it remains unknown whether he had anything to do with the homicide itself. Abdullah's daughter, Sarah G. Lalata Buko, lives in the Philippines. She last spoke with her father 2 weeks before he was reported missing and told CBC News that she was shocked to learn that his good friend is accused of being involved in his death. Lalata Buko described Abdullah as soft-spoken with a strong work ethic, leading one to wonder why someone would want him dead, especially a friend. Hopefully, these details will be revealed as the case unfolds. According to one of the more recent updates, the police were working to establish a precise timeline of Abdullah's whereabouts in the days leading up to his murder. 5. Francine Lewis and Joel Ryan. Comedian Francine Lewis is primarily famous for her appearance on the 2013 season of Britain's Got Talent. But the 47-year-old comic recently found herself in the throes of a much more scandalous topic: her husband Joel Ryan's alleged affair with his best friend's girlfriend. During an interview with GB News, Lewis confided that her partner of 17 years was cheating on her and that she'd just found out about it the night before. She explained that she found disgusting texts between the secret lovers and vowed to never, ever take Joel back. The interview was originally meant to focus on Lewis's experience with falling victim to a phony stock company and getting cheated out of £90,000, $111,284. But the context of the conversation shifted dramatically when she dropped the cheating bombshell, saying, in her own words, "There's so many scams going on all the time. But you know what's ironic? I stuck with my husband through this whole thing, and last night I found out he was cheating on me with his best friend's girlfriend." Francine went on to say that she wished she'd left Joel before he introduced her to the scammers who drained her savings, then added insult to injury by being unfaithful. The show's host reminded Lewis that she's a strong woman and asked her if she'll be alright. She responded by saying that she will be okay and that she has to get through it for her 2 children. In the meantime, Joel has completely denied the cheating allegations, but whether or not he cheated apparently depends on what someone's definition of cheating is. He confessed to sending inappropriate text messages to his friend's partner, but claims that he didn't cheat or have an affair. 4. Megan Milner. 38-year-old Megan Milner was walking her dog in rural Nova Scotia one morning in 2020 when something terrible happened. Local resident Joyce Parker was driving by when a teenage girl on the roadside flagged her down. The distraught young woman pointed toward a ditch where Joyce saw Megan's lifeless body. It was clear that Megan had been attacked, but the assailant's identity was a mystery. The woman's pit bull was initially at the scene, but ran off before police arrived. Joyce told CTV that the dog didn't seem aggressive, so she didn't think that he might be responsible for killing Megan. But detectives from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, suspected, right off the bat, that the victim's canine companion had mauled her to death. After hearing about these speculations, a local resident ran the dog over with their car and killed him. Police, however, determined that there was no criminal intent and did not charge the driver. It later came to light that the animal had a history of past violence. Investigators took this into consideration, along with witness statements, evidence found at the scene, and a medical examiner's report, and concluded that Megan had been fatally attacked by her dog. 3. Bestie betrayal. A businessman named Hassan Shehu recently lost his life at just 28 years old after being murdered in the Nigerian city of Minna. He'd been invited to his best friend's apartment to conduct an alleged business transaction, but was instead stabbed to death upon his arrival at the home. It wasn't until days later that police discovered Shehu's decomposing corpse inside the apartment, which by then had been abandoned. The suspect, Bashir Ibrahim, and his brother Aliyu had allegedly made off with a large sum of cash, which Shehu had brought with him to purchase a gold stock. They fled in the victim's car. Detectives caught up with the pair at a hotel where they were hiding out in the aftermath of the murder. A third suspect, Abdullah Garba, was arrested for buying Shehu's cell phone from the alleged killers. Shehu and Bashir routinely did business together. It was normal for them to buy and sell stocks and other assets between each other. So, Shehu's guard was already down before he even walked in the door of Bashir's apartment, where he was betrayed in one of the worst ways imaginable. The suspects reportedly confessed to the murder and have implicated yet another suspect, who supposedly helped plan the crime and agreed to dispose of Shehu's money in untraceable ways. They also allegedly admitted to leaving Shehu alone to helplessly bleed to death. 2. Vyacheslav Matrasov and Oleg Sviridov. 34-year-old Vyacheslav Matrasov was faced with an unthinkable level of devastation last year when he learned that his best friend, 32-year-old Oleg Sviridov, allegedly had harmed Matrasov's 6-year-old daughter. The two were drinking together when Sviridov fell asleep. Matrasov decided to snoop into the man's phone and found deeply disturbing evidence of his 6-year-old daughter being harmed by Sviridov. Instead of calling the police, Matrasov took justice into his own hands. He forced Sviridov to dig his own grave in Russia's Samara region. Matrasov then attacked his friend with a knife, leading to a violent and bloody fight between the pair that left Sviridov seriously injured. Investigators initially held Matrasov on suspicion of murder, but they concluded that Sviridov committed suicide following public outcries demanding the suspect's release. After all, society doesn't take too kindly to pedophiles, and many felt that Matrasov's method of exacting justice was perfectly appropriate given the circumstances. A petition in support of his freedom stated that any father would have reacted similarly. Russian journalist Ksenia Sobchak wrote on social media that all parents were standing up for Sviridov's killer. And in this case, the majority certainly spoke, but Matrasov wasn't completely let off the hook. He may have avoided a murder conviction, but he was sentenced to 18 months in a harsh prison work camp for a lesser charge. While it's a lot less than the 15-year sentence he would have received for murder, Matrasov supporters are nevertheless angry that he got any time at all, and feel that the sentence is an injustice. 1. Ghanasyan Marji and Sukalal Marji. What started out as an evening of drinking between two best friends earlier this year in the Indian state of Odisha ended in murder when the pair got into a disagreement over a cell phone. The drunken duo were reportedly sharing some liquor one night in early April when one of them lost their phone, leading to a heated argument. Things escalated to the point of getting physical, and Ghanasyan allegedly smashed a rock over Sukalal's head. Sukalal was rushed to the hospital with critical injuries, which he unfortunately died from. His surviving family members filed a complaint with the police, accusing Ghanasyan of killing his best friend. The suspect was arrested, and the matter is now in the hands of India's notoriously slow criminal court system. meaning he'll probably have plenty of time to reflect upon his actions while he waits to face justice.
Number 9. Shanisha Taylor. One of the most divisive news stories to make headlines in 2014 involved a mother leaving her 2 children in a hot car to attend a job interview. 35-year-old Shanisha Taylor was hoping to land a position with State Farm Insurance in Scottsdale, Arizona, but failed to arrange for someone to watch her 2-year-old and 6-month-old sons. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, she left the boys in her SUV, where the temperature rose to a sweltering 100 degrees. Someone heard crying coming from inside the vehicle and reported it to the police, who charged Taylor with 2 counts of child abuse. She explained her predicament and said that the interview was during the kids' nap time, so she expected them to sleep through it. Taylor claimed she was homeless, and her circumstances generated an outpouring of sympathy and support. Generous donors contributed over $100,000 to a crowdfunding campaign to help the down-and-out mom get on her feet. Taylor couldn't sell her narrative to everyone, though. To some, the details of her story just didn't add up, especially after her own family declared that she was not homeless and that she could have asked them to watch her children during the interview. Others believed that there was simply no excuse for a parent to put their kids in danger, no matter how difficult the circumstances. Taylor's lawyer argued that, as a veteran, a mentality gripped her that made her feel obligated to handle her responsibilities without asking for help. A judge sentenced her to 18 years of probation and required her to attend parenting classes. Number 8. Matthew Contreras. When his live-in girlfriend of several years arrived home from work in early 2022 and fell asleep, 25-year-old Matthew Contreras got curious and went through her phone. She woke up to a slew of cheating accusations based on a text conversation with a male coworker. Nothing was going on between them, according to the woman. Contreras had misread the situation, but this convinced him she was being unfaithful, and he allegedly beat her up. He then held a knife to his girlfriend's throat, used the knife to cut her hair, and threatened her with a handgun, placing the barrel right up against her forehead and into her mouth. The horrifying campaign of abuse continued as Contreras threw her to the floor, kicked her, and doused her with bleach. She later told the police that whenever she tried telling her boyfriend that she hadn't cheated, he got even angrier. For 2 days, he held her hostage, and while terrorizing his girlfriend seemed to be the man's priority, he made the time to attend a job interview. He forced his victim into the car at gunpoint, along with the couple's 1-year-old son, and drove across state lines from Texas to a prison in New Mexico, where he hoped to become an employee. During the drive, police pulled the vehicle over for speeding, but the terrified girlfriend kept quiet. Contreras went into the job interview alone, giving the woman an opportunity to escape. She flagged down an officer who works at the facility, and he took her to a hospital for medical treatment. Meanwhile, instead of working in jail, Contreras found himself locked up in one. He posted a $100,000 bond, and they released him. But he ended up back behind bars just days later on a weapons charge, and is currently being held without bail. Number 7. Inong Umoran. A young Nigerian woman named Inong Umoran left her home in the state of Akwa Ibom one day for a job interview last year and never returned. A friend who called her on the day she disappeared said that she answered the phone and started screaming. Concerned locals came together to search for Inong, whose remains were found in a shallow grave on a property belonging to a man named Uduyak Akpan. The suspect had lured the unsuspecting job seeker to his home under the guise of owning a farm and needing someone to work as a secretary. Akpan later told the press that when Inong arrived, he confessed that there was no farm and that he lied about having a job to offer her because he wanted to have sex with her. He claimed she agreed, as long as they used protection, which he allegedly removed during the act. Inong was furious and supposedly attacked Akpan, who lashed out and killed her. Police described Akpan as a serial rapist and accused some of his family members of helping him cover up the crime. Meanwhile, the defendant's father claimed Akpan suffers from schizophrenia, which alters his sense of reality, and that he has a history of being hospitalized for his mental issues. The suspect had already confessed to killing Inong, but retracted his statement, claiming that he had a fever when he was being interrogated and was being pressured by the police. But the story didn't hold up in court. Akpan ended up pleading guilty to murder, but denied ever raping the victim. Number 6. Chelsea Wilson. In 2016, an unsuspecting father in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, found himself entangled in federal drama when he thought he was dropping his 24-year-old daughter off at a job interview, and she instead robbed a bank. He assumed that his daughter, Chelsea Wilson, was planning to work at the financial institution and waited in his SUV while she went inside. When Chelsea returned to the vehicle with a large amount of money, she told her dad that they had offered her a position and had even given her a cash advance. He didn't find the situation suspicious, even though his daughter was wearing a wig, a hat, and sunglasses. Her father later learned that Chelsea had walked to the local TD Bank branch with a handwritten note, demanding all the $50 and $100 bills in the drawer. She made off with $300 total. The robbery was like 3 others that had recently occurred in the area, and the evidence led federal investigators to Chelsea's home. She reportedly admitted to committing multiple thefts that happened in the area recently, and said that she'd used the money to buy groceries. Number 5. Shamik Absalom Dunn. Earlier this year, 26-year-old Shamik Absalom Dunn went to a job interview at a tanning salon in Trussville, Alabama. But he had other things on his mind than actually getting a job there. He met the 19-year-old woman business manager at Palm Beach Tan and tried to sexually assault her. The victim fought her attacker off and escaped with minor injuries. She reported the terrifying incident to police after Dunn fled the scene. It didn't take long for authorities to track him down, since he used his real name and contact information on the job application. They charged the man with attempted rape and first-degree kidnapping. They released him from the Jefferson County Jail on a $90,000 bond. He is currently awaiting his next court date. Number 4. Riley Leon. Earlier this year, 16-year-old Riley Leon was on his way home from a job interview at a Whataburger restaurant in Elgin, Texas, when he suddenly found himself caught up in a violent tornado. The powerful winds knocked the young man's red Chevy pickup truck onto its side, then flipped it back upright. Shocking footage shows the vehicle being tossed around like a toy before Riley continued driving. He told local station NBC5 that he had just called a friend to deliver the good news that he had gotten a job at Whataburger when the tornado appeared out of nowhere. Not knowing what else to do, the teen held onto the steering wheel and prayed for his life. The tornado damaged the truck to the point it was barely able to drive. Riley drove it far enough to get it out of the road, then called his mom and the police. He emerged from the ordeal with some injuries, including some scratches and a fractured back. The condition of his beloved vehicle devastated him, which his father passed down to him. The story was all over the news and caught the attention of staff members at the Bruce Lowry Chevy dealership in Fort Worth. The generous business gave him a brand new red pickup truck to the young man, along with $15,000 for any other expenses he might need to take care of. The kind gesture moved Riley and his family to tears. They accompanied him to the dealership to pick up the vehicle, which may not replace the sentimental value of the truck that was damaged in the tornado, but will at least get the grateful teen to and from his new job. Number 3. Shayene Martinez. A TikToker named Shayene Martinez went viral recently for disastrous job interview footage that she uploaded to the social media platform. The young woman was submitting a digital application to SkyWest Airlines while talking to a friend on the phone. She began complaining to him about the company's interview questions and sarcastically mocking the material without noticing that she was recording herself on the application, which only gives candidates one shot at uploading their video. After that, she began applying lipstick. Shayene was visibly shocked when she realized she had just put her foot in her mouth and that the people in charge of making hiring decisions would hear her bad-mouthing the company. She apologized and did her best to save face, but she didn't get the job. The rejected applicant made the most out of the embarrassing ordeal and uploaded the cringeworthy yet hilarious footage to TikTok. It's received over 7 million views so far. Sadly, things didn't get better for Shayene, whose boss found out from the viral video that she was looking for another job, leaving her worried that she might get fired. Number 2. Essetu Mikana. While waiting to interview for a job at a hotel in Cape Town, South Africa in 2019, 23-year-old Essetu Mikana sat on a public bench and began snapping some selfies. She had pressed the building's buzzer, but nobody answered, so she simply waited for someone to let her inside. A police officer approached the young woman and asked her what she was doing on the property. Essetu explained that she was there for a job interview, but the cop didn't believe her because it was a Sunday, and she didn't think the business held interviews on the weekends. The overly suspicious patrolman began searching through Essetu's bag and throwing her belongings onto the ground. A disturbing cell phone video shows the officer rifling through the woman's stuff and pulling out a house key with a garage door remote attached. She accused Essetu of using the device to break into and rob people's vehicles. Esther responded to the baseless allegations by explaining that the remote didn't even work and she was just using it as a key holder. But the officer didn't believe her. She took Esther's phone, put the woman into a police van, handcuffed her, shouted at her, and kept her in a jail cell overnight. Esther too missed her job interview. Her mother went to the police station to smooth out the misunderstanding and clarify that the remote was broken and that her daughter certainly wasn't using it to break into cars. They finally released Esther when, in the words of a law enforcement spokesperson, they determined that the chances of a successful prosecution were unlikely. After being needlessly detained and harassed by someone she was taught to trust and whose job is to keep people safe, Esther said she was thinking about hiring a lawyer and complaining to the Human Rights Commission. She told the press that she was too embarrassed to contact the hotel, but the story went viral and captured the business's attention. A manager reached out to Esther and invited her to come by for an interview. It went well, and they offered her a paid internship. She said that she was grateful for the opportunity, which would provide her with a much-needed income to help support her family. Number 1. Laura Browder. Single mother Laura Browder had just moved to Houston, Texas in 2015 when she landed a job interview with a prospective employer who asked her to meet in the food court at a local shopping mall. She didn't have time to arrange childcare beforehand, so she brought her 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son with her and seated them nearby. Throughout the interview, the kids were only 30 feet away from Laura, and she monitored them the entire time. The meeting went well and ended with a job offer, which she eagerly accepted. What seemed like a good day took a disappointing turn when Laura returned to her children only to be met by a police officer, who arrested her for allegedly abandoning the kids. In a statement, she said that she would never intentionally put her son and daughter in harm's way, and that the interview was for a promising position that would have led to career growth. It's unclear whether the ordeal affected the job opportunity. Police handcuffed Laura at the scene and brought her in front of a judge, who understood that the woman had made a mistake but wasn't a terrible parent. They returned the case to the mother's care, and they ultimately dropped the charges. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live with the embarrassment of burping loudly during a job interview or get stuck working next to someone who eats onions and garlic for lunch every day? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.